Okay, looks like we're in. So hello, everybody. Welcome to our latest webinar in our Friday Cyber Bites series. We're thrilled to have you join us. My name is Liz Chyka, and I'll be your host. This week, we're doing something a little different and opening up the session to questions submitted from our audience. And we have two of our CISOs here to address them, Bob Chyka and Frank D'Arrigo. Each with slightly different backgrounds, Bob specializes in K through 12, higher education, and municipalities, and Frank specializes in K through 12, medical imaging, and Department of Defense manufacturing. Here's how today's session will unfold. We'll run through our questions, and if we have time, when we're done, we will open it up to any additional questions. Please keep your questions agnostic. We will not identify who submitted the question. As for housekeeping, just a couple of quick notes before we begin. The session will be recorded. If you have any technical issues, message us in the chat. As mentioned, if we have time for Q&A at the end, please submit any questions in the Q&A box. Lastly, the opinions, insights, and comments shared during this webinar are intended to provide a general understanding of topics discussed and are not intended to be used as formal advice. Each organization's cybersecurity needs are unique, and the information provided should be considered within the context of your specific environment. Before taking any actions or implementing any changes based on the content of this webinar, we strongly advise you to consult with your organization's security leadership and to align with your internal policies and compliance requirements. And with that said, let's get started. All right, here we go, guys. Are you ready?
You betcha.
Yep.
All right, question one. What is the best way to approach getting buy-in to get support for a cybersecurity program? Bob, I'm gonna pass that one to you.
Okay. I think this is a really good question, and I've come across all my years being in the industry. I've learned some great approaches that have worked for me, and I kind of discarded the ones that didn't. Just to get into this a little bit at a high level, I think it's very important to educate leadership and also don't give up. Make sure you communicate with them using their language. Make it understandable and digestible for the C-level, VP level, the board, etc. Don't make it too technical. Communicate your plan and present your information using business speak and business sense. If they deny you at first, never give up. You know the importance this is to the institution. So show your passion and drive on why this is important to the organization and educate them further. A real nice statement to use, or not a statement, but a process to use, is to show the company's financial health is at risk. If you can show them that the cost of not investing in cybersecurity is higher than the cost of investing in it, then you have some really, really good, serious leverage to use. Also use real world examples from security incidents in the same industry. And make sure your plan is well thought out, involve multiple stakeholders from your teams, and make sure your plan is finished. I can't communicate that enough. Sometimes you only get one chance at selling this to leadership, especially the board. And yeah, those are some of my key points. You could also leverage things like, which one that I use all the time is to reference IBM's annual report on the average cost of a data breach, because that covers all different industries. So those are some of my tactics that I found to be successful in the past. And I think Frank has some different ones that he could share that will be valuable to you also.
Yeah, I think that this is kind of the number one question, right? Whenever you start to embark upon a cybersecurity program, if your C-level doesn't understand why you're doing this, the rest of it is just going to fall apart. So you really need to speak to them, as Bob said, in their language. And at that level, they're concerned about risk to the business and also growth of the business. And so conversations really need to be focused in that area. At the heart of risk is, what is the value of the assets that you're trying to protect? If you don't know, then it's hard to know what size cybersecurity program is appropriate for your company. So have those conversations first and foremost. On the other side of the business, it's about growth. And so depending upon the industry you're in, there may be regulatory requirements that you need to be aware of. For example, if you're a DoD manufacturer, CMMC is an important part, a critical part of your business's growth plan. In addition, even if you're not in the DoD field, what we're finding is that more and more companies are starting to require vendor security assessments before they'll do business with you. So if you don't have a cybersecurity program, you're not going to be able to respond to a security questionnaire from a prospect. So that's another thing to drive awareness and get buy-in from the C-level. Finally, if your business does a lot of M&A, you're going to want to know how to assess a new acquisition against your current standards to see what the difference is between where they are and where you are. If you don't have a cybersecurity program and they do, that's a pretty big challenge. So those are just some ideas off the top of my head. But this is, Bob said, this is a great question. This is where it all starts. Liz?
Awesome. Yeah, I got some good points there. All right, let's move on to the next question. Thinking about the K through 12 space, what has been the biggest obstacle you faced and how did you overcome it? Frank, want to start with that one?
Sure. In some ways, the K-12 space isn't that different from the commercial space, especially at some smaller or medium-sized companies. As we're all kind of aware, IT plays a critical role in the development of a cybersecurity program. However, historically, IT has always been seen as a tactical business unit, right? It's the one that provides the help desk. It's the one that keeps the lights on. But as you start to move into cybersecurity, that role of IT changes from tactical to strategic. You have to know that the business of IT, the business of security is being managed appropriately. And that requires a level of maturity. So that, in my experience, that's been a major growth challenge for K-12, but also for other industries as well. Bob, do you have any thoughts on it?
Yeah, those are some really good points that I really agree with. And I also think that getting leadership buy-in and support is very important. I've seen programs stall because leadership doesn't fully back the cybersecurity program, which affects the school district as a whole. So I think it's really important to educate and get buy-in in the backing of leadership. It'll make all your initiatives flow much smoother and get adopted by the teachers and staff. You'll face less pushback if you could use that backbone of saying, the cabinet or the super and the assistant superintendents back this initiative. So I think leadership involvement and backing is very important in this space too.
Yeah, I think from a top-down scenario, you have to have buy-in from the top. Otherwise, never really flows downhill. All right. Our next question. As a cybersecurity professional, how do you stay current on your skill set? Bob?
So I know Frank and I might have some different strategies or things that we do. So I'll pass it to Frank after I go over what helps me in the CISO space. So a lot of staying current for me and in my past and present has always been networking and knowledge sharing. That's where I get the most. Sometimes we're all so busy. I'll put on a podcast or a YouTube video, but then I get distracted by other things. But when I'm networking with people or knowledge sharing, you have the direct attention of a small group or one-on-ones, and I find that very valuable. So I would really encourage to building your your networking profile with people. I find that to be my top um, um, my top quote thing that I do to really build my skill set. And networking just isn't at conferences or people you meet in webinars or other forums, but I even network in our office. Like I like listening to our other departments and see what they're working on because a lot of their work reflects upon mine or integrates with mine a lot of times. And of course, I always like talking to our other CISOs. That's where I really learn the most. So just don't think networking is outside of the office. Really take advantage of of networking and knowledge sharing within the office. Um, then of course reading. You know, I subscribe to a couple of my favorite digital mags, both from the CISO level and on active threats. So both at a top tier C level mags in the security space, but also finding out what the hackers are up to. And of course, YouTube videos I watch often. Sometimes I don't have time to get through all of them, so I get a piece of them. And once in a while, I'll listen to podcasts for information and to stay current on trends. Yeah, so that's what I do to stay on top and build my skill set. And Frank, I'll pass it to you for your input.
So I'm going to come at this from a little different angle. When I think about skills, right, it isn't just the management skills, the leadership skills, the technical skills around this. It really comes down to the communication skills. And sometimes you need to really engage people and connect with them on a very emotional level as part of this job. And so one of the best ways I found of doing that is through storytelling. And having a library of stories that apply to a particular industry that the customer is in, or maybe it's around a particular topic that you're discussing. Let's say it's multi-factor authentication. And being able to show that there's a real practical impact of the things that we're going to start doing at the client. And so where do you go to get stories, right? And so there's a million podcasts out there, cybersecurity podcasts, and each of them take a little different tact on how they deliver the stories. But the fact is that the stories are generally very useful and they become very impactful, and they can drive additional conversations. So on my must listen to list, if you're not familiar with Darknet Diaries, get familiar with it. It's a storytelling about the dark side of the internet. And that host does a terrific job. He has more than 100 episodes that are out there now, and they're just getting better and better every month. Malicious Life, that's another one that's very popular, and I find a lot of great content in it. Now, those are both longer format, so probably about an hour, maybe hour and a half. And so when you're in the car, maybe that fits in with your commute. If you've got a shorter commute, every Tuesday, Click Here produces one, and those are also story-based. They also do a really interesting thing at the end of the episode where they talk about what's been in the cyber news over the last week. So for me, those are really important, and they've really been very, very successful in relaying the stories that I learned through that channel.
Nice. Thank you for those tidbits. The tips they're great. All right, moving on to our next question. How do you measure cybersecurity progress? Frank, what do you think?
I think that's a great question, right? It's such a big topic. So how do you actually demonstrate that things are getting better or that there's risk that needs to be addressed? So there's a couple of ways. Bob may have mentioned earlier that gap assessments and penetration tests, right? And I think he did mention the fact that there's a poem that comes out of it. If you've never been experienced or exposed to a poem, it's a plan of action of milestones. And what it is a list of all of the activities that you have to take to get from your current state, right? If you do a gap assessment, this is where you are today, to your desired state, which is driven by what the business requirements are. And we talked a little bit about that before. Maybe it's a regulatory requirement. So those help to direct the energy of the company and their cybersecurity. And you typically apply a framework to that, right? And so you say, if I need to get from here to here, what specific things do I need to address? And so when you look at the NIST cybersecurity framework, right, that's a common one that we use. There's NIST 853, there's 800-171 and others, right, which help to lay out what the requirements are. From a management level, that becomes a great vehicle for communicating, how is the company doing, right? How do you prioritize all of those things? And I think in the NIST CSF, there's 106. So, where do you go? Where do you start first? And being able to get buy-in and being able to show progress against that commitment and making sure that budgets are aligned with those is a really important step. The other kind of POAM, which I don't know that we talked a great deal about, is the penetration test results. A couple of weeks ago, Liz, we had Nick from our red team who came in and he talked a little bit about his efforts. And so that also produces a POAM. And essentially that's a list of things that are discovered during a penetration test engagement. So these are the actual vulnerabilities in your organization. Maybe it's infrastructure, maybe it's process, maybe it's exposed data. But these are the things that you should start to focus in on. So if you really want to drive immediate value, fix the things that you know that are broken. The penetration test helps you do that. If you want to understand where your long-term strategic plan goes and how well you're mapping to that plan, that's the gap assessment POAM. Both of those tools are really critical to measuring your progress. Bob?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. The only other thing I would add is to help measure your progress is to retest and do another gap assessment after, maybe annually, and that'll show the progress that you've made from the initial one.
Perfect. Great example. Great add.
Totally. All right. Next question. How does one get started with a cybersecurity program? Bob?
Yeah, this is a really good question, and Frank touched upon it a little bit. But like Frank said, we would always start and recommend starting with either a penetration test or a gap assessment or both, just to get a baseline of where you are. And those will warrant a POAM from each initiative. And sometimes people look at the POAMs, especially if they're very immature customer in their security space, and they'll find that POAM intimidating. And even though it's ranked by criticality on what you should cover first, what we do to make it a little easier at the CISO level when we help customers build their cybersecurity programs we always start with CISA's 6 key areas of investment. And I'll just mention what those are briefly. I won't get into those in depth due to the time, but and most of these usually align with the POAM findings anyways, so it's a great place to start, and it takes care of 6 key critical areas, and that's MFA, patch management, backup and restore management, building a security incident response plan, implementing training programs, cybersecurity awareness and training programs to all the company stakeholders, and then exposure management. And this is a large umbrella of items that fit under exposure management. But 4 of the key ones that we concentrate on first are remote access protection, network protection, vulnerability management, and supply chain risk management for the org. So yeah, that's where we usually start with a cybersecurity program. And it just makes sense to start there with either a gap or a POAM or a pen test or both. Frank, I don't know if you have anything to add.
No, I think you nailed it. I mean, the 6 key areas of investment have been a very successful approach to dealing with what can seem to be a very unwieldy amount of controls and requirements. So if you haven't seen it, go check it out. It really helps to crystallize where your resources are going to be for the first year or year and a half.
Excellent. All right. Question number 6, our final question. How do you balance fostering a strong security culture with minimizing friction for employees? And Frank, you want to take that?
Sure. When I read the question, I think about the organization having a program and knowing what needs to be done in order to improve the security posture and protect the assets of the company. When I think about the friction part of it, though, I think about it more on an individual level. So why don't people do the things that they should be doing, right? Why aren't they following procedures that we've dictated as, being, this is the way that we're going to conduct this particular business operation? To me, it comes down to, everybody wants to do the right thing, right? Generally, people want to be supportive and they want to be contributing to the overall success of the program. However, when it comes down to a person changing their behaviors to align with a new way of thinking or a new way of acting, sometimes are people a little hesitant to make that change, right? It's a little bit scary. It's the way I've always done it, right? So this becomes, in a lot of ways, a very personal conversation with people, especially those that are more resistant. And at the core of this, it's really letting them understand why, right? And their role in helping to protect the organization and why we're making the changes that we're making. Without the understanding, you're gonna receive a lot more friction from those people, especially ones that have been in the organization for a long time. So, how do you do that, right? One of the 6 key areas of investment is awareness and training. Bob mentioned it before. We had a podcast last week where we talked about it and some of the strategies behind it. And so awareness and training can help in a couple of different ways. One, it will help to improve the organization's detection of phishing emails. And so a large part of awareness and training is focused around phishing. And there are some things that can happen in an automated fashion once a phish gets identified by somebody. The other part of it is more generalized training or reinforcement training around different, perspectives of security, right? Or processes of security. So why do we need to change our password standard, right? Why do we need multi-factor authentication? Why do we need to follow this process when it comes to direct deposit changes? So awareness and training isn't just the tool, right? But it's also continuous reinforcement of a new way of doing a thing, right? Of managing a process. So you get there, right? You know that you've lowered the friction when people start admitting that, one, they don't know, or two, they've made a mistake. If you're in an organization where you've done all the training and you still have that person who does a bad thing, but doesn't raise their hand and admit they've done the bad thing, then you haven't reached that person yet. And that person still is a risk to the organization. And since our job as cybersecurity professionals is help to identify and mitigate risk, this gives you a course of action, right? There's something with this person that needs to be addressed. There's some fundamental reason that they continue to operate in the previous manner. So it really comes down to what is the organizational goals, right? What is the organization doing to help people achieve those goals? And then on a personal level, how do you do the reach out to people that are struggling to do the right things? Bob, you have any thoughts on this?
Wow. I mean, I think your answer was great. The only thing I would add is I'm a real big culture guy with companies and organizations, and making sure um, you know, culture is understood. A lot of times people say, "Oh yeah, it's written in a statement as our company culture," but most employees or some employees aren't aware of actually what that culture is. So I think stakeholders making security part of their culture or building that into it will really go a long way if employees understand what culture actually is, and that security is part of it. It becomes their new way of doing their work. Obviously, a lot of people have been using the same workflows for the past, X amount of years, 5, 10 years. And when security comes into play, there's going to be some inconveniences, and doing things in a different way. Your workflows are going to get totally blown up, but they need to understand it's part of the culture of the company to protect its assets. And in order to stay out of the news, um, there's going to be new initiatives and new ways of operating on a daily basis put into place. Um, yeah, a lot of my customers struggle with this, getting people to buy in, um, the stakeholders. So they always hear me say this, that security is not a convenience. And I think people have to understand that it's not IT wanting this plan or wanting this initiative or to uproot the way that you handle your business on a daily basis, but there's a reason for doing this, and it's to protect the company and the assets of the company and the brand name of the company and the reputation. So I think really getting people educated on what culture is and why security is becoming part of a company's culture will go a long way too.
Excellent points. Excellent. All right, so we are at the top of the hour, so we don't have any time for additional questions. If you did submit a question that was not addressed during the presentation, we'll definitely follow up with you after the webinar to make sure you have any answers that you need. With that being said, two things. One, all of the webinars that we have had already, and we've mentioned a few of them, Red Team, there was a really good one done by Courtney, another member of our Red and Blue team, and then last week's webinar, are all available through our YouTube channel, and they're also available at cidarasecurity.com in our blog. So feel free to check those out. There's lots of good information up there, lots of tips and tricks as well. And then if you haven't already, please sign up for our next webinar on November 14th at 11 a.m., a comprehensive approach to IT vulnerability management. So I would like to thank you all for attending, and thank you to our panel. Lastly, go Bills.
Go
Have a great
Bills!
day, guys.
Thank you.
Take care.